Hey, today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Part 1. The Rainy Night and the Stranger. Rain poured relentlessly, each drop striking the window pane like an unfinished symphony, both noisy and lonely. Ellie Bennett trudged along the narrow path leading to her quaint wooden house, her soaked canvas shoes squelching beneath her feet. Her thin beige coat offered little protection against the biting chill of the April rain, and her light brown hair clung to her cheeks in damp strands. She pulled her collar higher, clutching a canvas bag that held a few books she'd borrowed from the library, where she'd worked until late tonight. Just a few more steps, and she'd be curled up in warm blankets, sipping hot cocoa, forgetting the long, exhausting day. But tonight, fate had other plans. As Ellie turned into the small path leading to her porch, the dim yellow streetlight cast a glow on a huddled figure. A man, his clothes tattered and his long, wet hair obscuring most of his face, sat pressed against the wooden wall beneath the overhang. His arms were wrapped tightly around himself, his shoulders trembling in the cutting cold. Ellie froze, her umbrella tilting slightly, exposing her face to the faint light. A familiar feeling stirred within her. A fleeting pang of sympathy she often felt when passing homeless people on the street. She'd seen them many times under makeshift shelters or in park corners, and usually she'd walk by, leaving a trace of regret in her heart before moving on with her life. She intended to do it again, just step past him, unlock the door, and shut everything out behind her. But then he looked up. Those eyes, his eyes, shone like a beacon in the dark night. They didn't plead or despair. Instead, they carried a strange gentleness, as if whispering a story she'd never heard. Ellie's heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but from a feeling she couldn't name. She stood there in the rain, looking at him, and he looked back at her, silent. Only the steady patter of rain filled the air, like a melody bridging two distant worlds. "Are you okay?" Ellie spoke, her voice soft, almost drowned out by the rain. She wondered what she was doing. This wasn't her. She wasn't the type to stop in the middle of a rainy night to talk to a stranger, especially one who looked like he'd stepped out of the tragic pages of a book she'd read at the library. He gave a faint smile, subtle but enough to light up his weathered, unshaven face. "I'm fine. It's just, the rain's heavy." His voice was low, slightly hoarse, yet there was a warmth woven into each syllable, like a small fire crackling in a hearth. Ellie bit her lip, wrestling with herself. She could walk inside, lock the door, and forget those eyes. Reason told her he was a stranger, that she shouldn't take risks, that she was just a 26-year-old girl living alone in this small town. But then, as if pulled by an invisible thread, she sighed and set her umbrella down on the porch. "Wait here a moment," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Without waiting for a reply, she hurried inside, leaving him with a look of quiet surprise. Ellie's little house welcomed her with familiar warmth. She kicked off her wet shoes, letting them tumble by the door, then rushed to the bedroom to dig out a blanket. It was an old green wool one her mother had knitted, not new but soft and warm. Next, she darted to the kitchen, switched on the kettle, and quickly grabbed a white ceramic mug and a chamomile tea bag from the cupboard. When the water boiled, she poured it into the mug, the steam rising and fogging her glasses. Ellie paused for a second, staring at the tea, wondering if she'd lost her mind. But she shook her head, brushed the thought aside, and carried the blanket and mug back outside. He was still there, motionless, like a statue carved with sorrow by the wind and rain. Ellie approached, setting the blanket beside him, then holding out the tea. "Take it. It's cold tonight." Her voice was gentle, though tinged with caution. She stood a safe distance away, hands in her coat pockets, watching. He took it, his thin, trembling hands brushing the edge of the blanket. "Thank you," he whispered, his sincerity making Ellie flush unexpectedly. She turned away, pretending to watch the rain to hide her embarrassment. "It's nothing. I just don't like seeing someone freeze out there." She shrugged, trying to sound casual, but her heart was stirring. Why did she care? Why couldn't she walk away like always? He sipped the tea, the warmth from the mug bringing a faint flush to his cheeks. "You're kinder than I thought," he said, his tone teasing. "Most people just walk by." His smile widened, though still shy, as if he wasn't used to being noticed. Ellie laughed, a clear sound cutting through the rain. "I was going to walk by too, but I don't know why I couldn't." She tilted her head, watching him wrap the blanket around himself, sipping the tea in small gulps. There was something about him, not his ragged appearance or hunched posture, but the way he looked at her, as if she were the only light in his dark night. And that kept her gaze fixed on him. The rain kept falling, but the space between them seemed to warm. Ellie stood there, hands in her pockets, observing him. She told herself this was just a kind gesture, that he'd leave in the morning, and everything would return to normal. But then as he glanced up, his eyes gleaming as if he wanted to say something, her heart fluttered again. A wild, unshakable thought crossed her mind. He couldn't stay out here all night. "You can't sit out here all night," Ellie blurted out, even as her reason screamed in protest. She crossed her arms, feigning sternness to mask her nerves. "Come inside. Just the living room. Near the door. But you leave in the morning. Got it?" He looked up, so startled he nearly dropped the mug. "Are you sure? I don't want to bother you." His voice faltered, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Ellie nodded, forcing herself to stay calm. "Sure, but don't do anything weird. I've got a broom in the corner." She laughed as he nodded eagerly, his face a mix of gratitude and awkwardness. His smile brightened then, like moonlight breaking through clouds, and Ellie realized she liked seeing him smile. She opened the door, leading him into her small, cozy living room. The golden glow of a table lamp spilled across the walls, illuminating wooden shelves packed with the romance novels Ellie adored. A shaggy wool rug lay on the floor, and an old but comfortable sofa sat by the window. He stepped inside, still clutching the blanket, his tattered shoes leaving small wet streaks on the floor. Ellie pointed to the sofa. "Sleep there. I'll be in my room. If you need anything, just knock." He nodded, settling onto the sofa, still holding the mug like a treasure. "Thank you. Really, I don't know what else to say." His voice softened, but his eyes shone, as if she'd just given him an entire world. Ellie smiled, turning toward her room, but before closing the door, she glanced back. "What's your name?" "Nah, Nate," he replied, hesitating slightly, as if the name had been chosen on the spot. "And you?" "Ellie." She nodded, feeling like she'd just found a small piece of a story she didn't know she was writing. That night, the rain continued its steady rhythm outside the window. Inside Ellie's little house, a new warmth crept in, like a fire crackling in the hearth, waiting to blaze. As she drifted to sleep in her familiar bed, she dreamed of rainy roads, strange eyes, and a smile, Nate's smile, glowing in the dark. She didn't know that, from this moment, her life would never be the same. Part 2. Unusual. The early morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, casting fragile streaks of light across the wooden floor of Ellie Bennett's small house. She woke with a rare sense of relief, as if the rain from the previous night had washed away some of the exhaustion from her long days at the library. Stretching, her bare feet brushed the soft wool rug, and she smiled faintly as she recalled last night. The rain, the stranger, and her impulsive decision. But then she noticed the house was too quiet. No sound stirred except for the cheerful chirping of birds outside. Ellie pushed open her bedroom door and stepped into the living room with a flicker of unease. The old sofa was still there, but empty. The green wool blanket was neatly folded over the armrest, and the white ceramic mug had been washed and placed upside down on the small kitchen counter. There was no trace of anyone having been there, except for the unexpected tidiness in a room that was usually cluttered. Ellie frowned, approaching the sofa, and then she saw it, a tiny scrap of paper, perhaps torn from the edge of an old newspaper, lying quietly under the table. She bent down to pick it up, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the scrawled but clear words. "Thank you for trusting me." No signature, no explanation, just 8 simple words. Ellie stood there holding the note, feeling as though she'd just read a riddle without an answer. "Nate," she murmured, the name he'd given her last night echoing in her mind like an unfamiliar tune. He'd left as she'd asked, But why did she feel a faint emptiness? She shook her head, telling herself she was being silly, then tucked the note into her coat pocket and began her day as usual. But Nate didn't vanish as she'd expected. 3 days later, while Ellie was busy sorting through a pile of old books in the corner of her house, part of her plan to turn her dream of a book and coffee shop into reality, she heard a gentle knock at the door. She looked up, pushing her slipping glasses back up her nose, and saw him standing there on the porch in the same tattered clothes. His hair was still matted, his beard scruffy, but his eyes sparkled, as if carrying the morning sunlight with them. "Hi," he said, his voice low and warm. "I was passing by, saw you looked busy, so I thought I could help with something." Ellie was surprised, but then she smiled more naturally than she'd expected. "You don't have to do that, but since you're here, come in. These books are driving me crazy." She gestured to the mess on the floor, a mix of romance novels, cookbooks, and a few torn covers she planned to repair. Nate nodded, stepping inside with a shy but determined air. He didn't say much, just quietly got to work. He arranged the books alphabetically, wiped dust off the wooden shelves, and even fixed a wobbly shelf leg Ellie had long meant to discard. His hands, though thin and rough, moved with an odd dexterity, as if he were once accustomed to tasks more precise than a life of wandering. Ellie watched him from a distance, holding a copy of Jane Eyre she intended to reread. "You're really good at this," she said, her tone teasing. "Were you a carpenter or something before?" Nate paused for a second, then chuckled softly. "Not quite. I just like fixing things." He didn't look at her, continuing his work, but Ellie noticed how he always dodged questions about himself. She wanted to press further, but held back, afraid of shattering the peaceful atmosphere between them. When he finished, Ellie brewed a cup of chamomile tea, a new habit, and handed it to him. "Thanks, Nate. Really. I don't know how to repay you." He took the tea, shaking his head. "No need. A cup of tea is enough." He sipped it, eyes half closed as if savoring it, and Ellie suddenly thought, he looked so unusual, not at all like a typical homeless person. In the days that followed, Nate became a strange but familiar part of Ellie's life. He didn't show up regularly, but each time he did, he brought quiet help. One day he fixed a leaking pipe in the kitchen. Another, he brewed coffee from an old packet Ellie had forgotten in the cupboard. And she had to admit, it tasted better than she'd expected. He never asked for anything. No money, no food, just accepted a cup of tea and left with a faint smile. Ellie grew accustomed to his presence. She liked how he worked silently, liked hearing his low voice offer short but clever remarks. Once, when she complained about a shelf being too high to reach, he blurted out, "You should get a folding ladder, the kind with wheels. Much more practical." Ellie stared at him, surprised. "How do you know about stuff like that?" He just smiled, shrugged, and changed the subject. Her curiosity about him grew. Nate wasn't like any homeless person she'd met. He spoke politely, moved with subtle grace, and sometimes let slip comments that startled her. One afternoon, as she sketched plans for her dream book and coffee shop, he peered over her shoulder and said, "You should put the counter near the window. Natural light warms the space. Customers will love it." Ellie turned, mouth agape. "You sound like a design expert." Nate laughed, the first time she'd seen him laugh so freely. "Just an opinion. I like seeing things look nicer." But when she asked what he'd done before, he fell silent, his gaze distant, then stood to excuse himself. One late evening, as Ellie sat on the sofa with her notebook, jotting down ideas for the shop, Nate knocked. He stepped inside, carrying the faint scent of rain. The sky had just cleared after a light shower. "I found this on the street," he said, handing her a small piece of wood, likely a fragment from an old table. "You could paint it, make a sign." Ellie took it, beaming. "You're a treasure, Nate. How do you come up with these things?" She set the wood down, watching him sit across from her with his tea. Tonight, she decided to probe further. "Nate, where are you from? I mean, before this life?" He froze, his fingers tightening around the mug. "Just somewhere far away," he replied, his voice dropping. "Nothing worth mentioning." He looked out the window where faint moonlight filtered through, and Ellie realized she'd touched an invisible boundary. Sorry, she said quickly, guilt rising. I shouldn't have asked. It's fine, he replied, turning back with a faint smile. It's natural to be curious, but I'm not good at talking about myself. He stood, setting the mug on the table. Thanks for the tea. I'll go now. Ellie nodded, watching him step out, his thin frame fading into the night. She sat back, holding the note he'd left that first day, rereading, "Thank you for trusting me." Who was Nate? Why did he keep showing up, helping her, yet hiding everything about himself? She didn't know, but one thing was certain. He wasn't ordinary. And she, though reluctant to admit it, was starting to look forward to his knocks. That night, Ellie lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with images of Nate, his bright eyes, rare smiles, and oddly insightful words. She told herself it was just curiosity, but deep in her heart, something else was growing, like a gentle breeze over a field, carrying the scent of something new, yet unnamed. Part 3. A Little Secret. Ellie Bennett never imagined she'd feel so nervous about a simple meeting, but today, as she stood before the mirror in her cramped bedroom, adjusting a slightly wrinkled cream blazer and smoothing her light brown hair, her heart raced faster than usual. This was her first time meeting a potential investor for her dream book and coffee shop, a friend of the library manager, Margaret, who'd agreed to hear her pitch. Ellie wasn't great with words, but she'd spent the past week preparing, from handwritten sketches to scribbled numbers on paper. She just hoped everything would go smoothly. As she stepped into the living room, Nate was already there, sitting on the sofa in his familiar state, tattered coat, matted hair, and those bright eyes fixed on her. He'd arrived early that morning, carrying an old box of paper clips he'd found somewhere, suggesting she could use them to organize her documents. Ellie laughed at the odd gift, but then a sudden thought made her blurt out, "Nate, would you come with me? I'm just a little nervous. Having someone there would help." Nate looked up, surprised. "Come with you? I'm not sure I'd fit in." He ran a hand over his scruffy beard, as if suddenly aware of his appearance. "It's fine," Ellie said quickly, offering an encouraging smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just sit there. I trust you." She wasn't sure why she said it, but Nate's eyes, those eyes that always softened her, made her feel he was the one she wanted by her side right now. After a moment's hesitation, Nate nodded. "All right, if you need me." The meeting took place at a small cafe in town, a spot Ellie had once dreamed of transforming into her own space. Her potential investor, Henry Grayson, was a middle-aged man with a friendly smile but sharp eyes. He sat across from Ellie, holding an espresso, listening as she pitched her vision for the book and coffee shop. A place not just for selling books, but a cozy corner where people could gather, chat, and find warmth. Nate sat beside her, silent, hands clasped on the table, occasionally glancing at the sketches Ellie spread out. Ellie spoke fairly confidently, though she stumbled a few times when mentioning costs. Grayson nodded, jotting notes in his pad now and then. But when he asked, "How do you plan to attract steady customers beyond just selling books and coffee?" Ellie froze. She'd prepared an answer, but under pressure, her mind went blank. She pursed her lips, fingers gripping the edge of her paper, searching for words. Unexpectedly, Nate spoke up, his voice low but clear. She could use a community model. Create an open space, host free reading sessions or small workshops, like writing or drawing. That wouldn't just draw people in, it'd build loyalty. Pair it with flexible pricing, like discounted coffee during off hours, and revenue would stabilize. Both Ellie and Grayson turned to him, stunned. Ellie's jaw dropped, while Grayson pushed his glasses up, studying Nate more closely. "You've got a point," he said, a hint of intrigue in his tone. "Where'd you get that idea? Have you worked in business?" Nate faltered, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "No, not really, just something I read somewhere." He lowered his head, fiddling with his torn sleeve, but Ellie could tell he was dodging. She wanted to press him, but Grayson cut in. "The workshop idea is solid. If you develop it, I think this project has potential. I'll consider investing." Ellie beamed, forgetting the odd moment. "Thank you, really. I'll refine the plan right away." She glanced at Nate, her eyes full of gratitude. He just nodded slightly, saying nothing more. On the walk home, Ellie couldn't contain her excitement. She strode beside Nate, chattering nonstop about the meeting. Did you hear him? He loved your idea. I didn't expect you to come up with something so sophisticated. You totally saved me today. She laughed, her eyes sparkling in the late afternoon light. Nate gave a faint smile, hands in his coat pockets. I was just rambling. You're the one who did well. His voice was gentle, but Ellie sensed that familiar evasion. She stopped walking, tilting her head to look at him. Nate, you're really smart. I mean, community model, flexible pricing. Not everyone can come up with that. Did you study something? Or do something before this? She asked, her tone curious with a touch of teasing. He turned away, gazing toward the road stretching out to the fields. I just like observing things. Nothing special. He started walking again, and Ellie knew she'd hit that invisible wall once more. She sighed but didn't push him. Today had been great, and she didn't want to ruin it. That night, Ellie sat on the sofa, her old laptop balanced on her knees. She was typing up the plan, adding Nate's ideas, but her thoughts kept drifting to him. His comments at the meeting weren't rambling. They were too precise, too professional, as if he'd once sat in the big boardrooms, not wandered the streets. She bit her lip, fingers tapping idly on the keyboard. Nate, who are you? She muttered. Then on a whim, she opened Google. She typed Nate and business, but the results were generic. She laughed at herself. How silly, expecting to find anything with so little to go on. But then she recalled how he'd hesitated that first night. Nah, Nate. Had he almost said something else? She tried Nathan, adding business, and missing. A fleeting idea from the mystery novel she'd read. The search results loaded, and Ellie scrolled without much hope. But then an article from 6 months ago stopped her cold. The headline read, Nathan Cross, young tech billionaire, vanishes after internal scandal at Crosstech. Her heart pounding, she clicked it. The piece detailed Nathan Cross, 31, founder of a billion-dollar tech empire. He disappeared after accusations from a close partner, leaving his company in chaos. No one knew where he'd gone. Only a grainy photo remained. A tall, thin man with brown hair, in a suit, standing on an office balcony. Ellie zoomed in, holding her breath. That face, though obscured by the beard and long hair in her memory, bore familiar features. The eyes, those bright, gentle yet deep eyes, were identical to Nate's. She leaned back, hands trembling, as she set the laptop on the table. No way, she whispered. But the more she looked, the more she thought of his clever remarks and skillful hands, the less she could deny it. Nate might be Nathan Cross? Ellie didn't sleep that night. She scoured articles about Nathan Cross, a tech genius, a Forbes regular, then suddenly gone. Some rumored bankruptcy, others said he'd fled overseas. No one guessed he'd be living as a homeless man in a small town like hers. She clutched her head, trying to piece it together. If Nate was Nathan, why hide from her? What was he running from? And what should she do with the secret? The next morning, when Nate knocked as usual, carrying a broken chair he'd found to fix, Ellie looked at him differently. She smiled, trying to act normal, but a storm raged inside her. Hi, Nate, she said, her voice slightly off. How are you today? He nodded, setting the chair down. Good, you? You look tired. Ellie forced a laugh. Just didn't sleep well. She watched him, this strange man who'd entered her life, and wondered, should she confront him, or keep pretending she didn't know, letting this story unfold on its own? Part 4. The Truth Revealed. Ellie stood in her small kitchen, clutching a cup of chamomile tea that had long gone cold. The soft yellow light from the ceiling cast a glow on her face, a face torn with conflict. Last night, after uncovering Nate's secret on Google, she hadn't slept. Articles about Nathan Cross, the missing tech billionaire, replayed in her mind like an endless film. She'd seen him this morning when he brought the broken chair to fix and tried to act normal. But every time he smiled, every time he said something clever, she saw Nathan Cross overlapping with the ragged man before her. She couldn't take it anymore. She needed the truth. Nate, Ellie called, her voice trembling as he bent down to tie his torn shoelaces by the door. He looked up, his bright eyes meeting hers, and Ellie felt her heart tighten. Can you sit down for a minute? I need to talk. Nate frowned but nodded, walking back to the sofa and sitting down, hands clasped as usual. Is something wrong? He asked, his low voice tinged with concern. Ellie took a deep breath, set the tea on the table, and summoned all her courage to look him in the eye. Nate, are you Nathan Cross? She spoke quickly, as if slowing down would rob her of the nerve to ask. The space between them fell into a suffocating silence. Only the steady ticking of the wall clock marked the tense seconds. Nate froze, his eyes widening for a moment. Then he lowered his head and let out a dry laugh. Nathan Cross? Who's that? What novel did you read to think I'm a billionaire? His tone tried for lightness, but Ellie caught the tremor in it. Don't lie to me, Ellie interrupted, her voice firmer than she expected. She stepped to the table, grabbed her old laptop, and opened the article she'd saved last night. She turned the screen toward him, the photo of Nathan Cross in a sleek suit glaringly clear. Here, look. These eyes, this build. It's you, isn't it? Nate stared at the screen, and for the first time, Ellie saw his usual calm crack. He clenched his fists, his lips pressing into a thin line. Ellie, you're imagining things. I'm Nate, just a drifter. I'm not that guy. He stood, heading for the door, but Ellie darted in front of him. No, don't go, she nearly shouted, her eyes glistening with tears. I'm not stupid, Nate. I've seen you talk at the meeting, the way you fix things, the ideas you come up with that I'd never think of. You're not ordinary. And the name, you almost said Nathan that first night, I remember it. You're Nathan Cross, aren't you? Tell me the truth. Nate stood still, his shoulders trembling faintly. He looked at Ellie, his eyes filled with pain, as if she'd just torn open an old wound. Finally he sighed, collapsing back onto the sofa, hands cradling his head. All right, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Yes, I'm Nathan Cross. Ellie's legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, hand on her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Though she'd suspected it, though she'd braced herself, hearing him admit it still left her reeling. So, what's all this? You're a billionaire, you had a tech empire, and you disappeared to live like this? Why? Nate, looked up, his eyes red but dry. You want the truth? Fine. 6 months ago, I was betrayed. The person I trusted most, my best friend, my partner, sold me out. He fabricated a scandal, accused me of embezzling company funds, all to take Crosstech for himself. I fought back, but then I realized no one was on my side. Everyone who'd called me a friend, who'd laughed with me, turned their backs when I lost my money, my power. I lost faith, Ellie. I didn't know who was genuine, who was just after my wealth. He paused, his voice catching. So I left. I gave up everything. My reputation, my fortune, the name Nathan Cross. I wandered, aimless, just to see if anyone would see me as a person, not a money machine. And then I met you. Ellie stood there stunned. She didn't know what to feel, anger, pity, or confusion. She looked at him, a man who'd once stood at the top, now hunched in tattered clothes, recounting his story with a bitter edge. So, you lied to me, she asked, her voice shrinking. All those times you came here, helped me, drank tea with me. Was it just a game to escape your past? No! Nate shot up, stepping toward her, but he stopped when she flinched back. No, Ellie, it wasn't like that. I didn't lie to you. I came here because you were the first person who didn't ask who I was, who didn't want anything from me. You gave me a blanket, tea, a place to sleep, just because you saw me cold. You didn't know who I was, but you trusted me. That's something I never had, even as Nathan Cross. Ellie turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. But you didn't tell me the truth. You let me think you were just some homeless guy, when you're a billionaire. Do you know how stupid I feel? I trusted you, Nate, or Nathan, or whoever you are. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just scared. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd see me differently. Scared you'd be like the others, only seeing me through money and fame. I didn't want to lose the one real thing in my life. You. Ellie shook her head, wiping her tears. But you didn't give me a chance to choose. You decided for me, and now I don't know what to believe. She walked to the door, flinging it open. I need time, Nate. I can't think straight right now. Nate looked at her, his eyes brimming with pain. He nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict. I understand. I don't want to turn your life into the mess mine once was. I'll go. He stepped toward the door but turned back, his voice soft as a breeze. Thank you, Ellie, for showing me kindness still exists, even just a little. He walked out, his thin frame fading into the dim sunset. Ellie shut the door, sliding to the floor, burying her face in her hands as she sobbed. She was angry at him for hiding, angry at herself for trusting blindly. But deep down, she couldn't deny it. She missed him, missed his faint smile, the way he made coffee, the quiet ways he helped her without asking for anything. And now, with the truth laid bare, she didn't know if she could let him go forever. That night, Ellie lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She thought of Nathan Cross, not the billionaire from the articles, but Nate, the man who'd sat under her porch in the rain, who'd left her the note saying, "Thank you for trusting me." She was confused, hurt, but also wondering, if he came back, would she open the door again, or would she let him remain a little secret in her life forever? Outside, Nate walked down the dark road, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't know where he was going, but for the first time in 6 months, he felt a small spark in his chest. A spark named Ellie. Whether she forgave him or not, she'd changed him, and he knew he couldn't keep running forever. Part 5. Lost and Found. In the days after Nate left, Ellie's small house fell into an eerie silence. No more gentle knocks at the door in the morning, no more thin figure quietly fixing bookshelves or brewing coffee in the kitchen. The old sofa remained, the green wool blanket neatly folded as it was the day he departed. But the emptiness of the space suffocated Ellie. She tried to fill the void with work, organizing books, drafting plans for her book and coffee shop, or simply reading the romance novels she loved. But every time she picked up a book, she thought of Nate, his faint smile as he sat across from her, tea in hand, listening to her ramble about some silly story. Ellie was angry at him, angry for hiding the truth, for making her feel foolish for trusting someone she didn't truly know. But she was also hurt, more deeply than she'd expected. She missed him, his gentle eyes, his warm voice, the quiet moments when he helped her without asking for anything in return. Each time she passed the porch where she'd first met him in the rain, she wondered, if she hadn't opened the door that night, would things be different? Would she have escaped the hollow ache gnawing at her heart? She told herself to forget him. Nate, or Nathan Cross, didn't belong in her world. He was a billionaire with a complicated past, while she was just an ordinary girl with a modest dream. But every night, lying in bed, she found herself staring out the window, foolishly hoping he'd return, knock on the door, and everything would be as it was. 2 weeks passed, and Ellie slowly regained her old routine. She returned to the library, resumed her job, and tried to focus on her book and coffee shop plans. She'd sent a polished proposal to Mr. Grayson, the investor she'd met with Nate, but she didn't expect much. He'd liked the idea, but she knew she lacked the capital or experience to secure a big investment. She only hoped for a small boost, enough to get started. But then on a Tuesday morning, everything changed. Ellie was behind the library counter, sorting a stack of overdue books, when her phone rang, an unknown number. She frowned, answering hesitantly. "Hello, this is Ellie Bennett." "Hello, Ms. Bennett," a woman's voice replied, professional and polite. "I'm Linda from Grayson and Partners Financial. I'm calling to inform you that your book and coffee shop project has been approved for investment. A substantial sum was transferred to your account this morning, enough to expand into a chain if you'd like. You can check your email for details." Ellie stood frozen, gripping the phone. "What? You mean an investment? But I don't understand." Mr. Grayson only said he'd consider it. Linda chuckled softly over the line. This isn't directly from Mr. Grayson. The investment is anonymous, but the sender requested we contact you. Check your account. Everything's been arranged. The call ended and Ellie remained rooted in place, her mind spinning. She fumbled to open her banking app, and when she saw the amount, a figure beyond her wildest dreams, she nearly dropped her phone. 6 digits, enough not just to open one shop, but to build a small chain, like she'd fantasized about on sleepless nights. But who? Who would do this without leaving a name? She rushed home after her shift, her heart full of questions. When she opened the mailbox by the porch, it pounded harder. Inside, amid a few flyers, was a small folded piece of paper, just like the one Nate had left that first time. She opened it, and the familiar scrawl appeared. Keep believing in good things. N. Ellie sank onto the porch steps, her hands trembling as she held the note. Nate, she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. It was him. She knew it without a doubt. No one else wrote like him. No one else addressed her with that simple, earnest sincerity. But why? After everything, after he'd walked away, why would he do this? That night, Ellie didn't sleep. She sat on the sofa, the note laid out before her, next to a cup of chamomile tea she'd brewed out of habit. She thought of Nate, no, Nathan Cross, and what he'd said before leaving. He'd lost faith in people, abandoned everything because he couldn't tell who was genuine. Yet he'd come back, quietly helping her, just as he had with the shelves and the coffee. He didn't want her to know, didn't want her to feel indebted. He just wanted her to chase her dream. She cried, not out of anger or hurt anymore, but from a tangled mix of gratitude and regret. She missed him more than ever. She wanted him here, sitting across from her, holding a teacup and smiling faintly like before. She wanted to tell him she didn't need the money, didn't need the investment. She just needed him to come back and be honest with her again. But he was gone, and she didn't know where he was. The next day, Ellie went to the bank, trying to trace the sender, but the teller shook his head. It's an anonymous transfer through a charitable fund. We can't disclose anything. She returned home, her heart heavy. Nate had vanished again, like a breeze passing through her life, leaving traces she couldn't hold. Time moved on, and Ellie began using the money to bring her dream to life. She rented a small space in town, painted the walls a soft cream, built wooden bookshelves, and set up a coffee counter near the window, just as Nate had suggested. The first shop, named The Warm Shelf, opened on a sunny day, and customers came in greater numbers than she'd imagined. They loved the cozy space, the carefully curated books, and the free chamomile tea she included with every order, a quiet tribute to him. But every day as she stood behind the counter, Ellie glanced at the door, hoping to see that familiar figure step inside. She wasn't angry anymore. She understood him, his pain, his reasons for running. She only wished he knew she didn't need Nathan Cross, the flashy billionaire. She just needed Nate, the man who'd sat under her porch in the rain, who'd made her laugh with the simplest things. One afternoon, while wiping down a shelf, Ellie paused at the small wooden sign Nate had once found. She'd painted it into the shop's sign, writing "The Warm Shelf" in gentle script. She smiled, brushing her fingers over it, and whispered, "Thank you, Nate, wherever you are." That night, Ellie sat in the shop after closing, the golden lamplight glowing on her face. She unfolded the note. Keep believing in good things. N. Once more setting it beside her tea. She didn't know if he'd return, but she decided to keep believing. In kindness, in her dream, and in the chance that one day she'd find him again, not to demand anything, but to offer a true thank you. Far off in another corner of town, Nate stood under a street lamp, gazing toward the light of the Warm Shelf. He smiled, a sad but relieved smile. He didn't dare approach, didn't dare face her again. But seeing the shop aglow, seeing her dream take shape, he knew he'd done the right thing. He turned away, stepping into the darkness, carrying Ellie's image in his heart. The only person who'd ever trusted him, no strings attached. Part 6. Reunion. Ellie's small town had never been so alive. On a late May evening, as the sunset bathed the cobblestone streets in gold, the community buzzed with excitement over a special event, The region's largest charitable foundation was hosting a book gala to announce funding plans for local libraries. Ellie had received an invitation from Mrs. Margaret, the library manager she worked for, with a handwritten note on the card. "You must come, Ellie. This is a big opportunity for your dream." She wasn't sure what it meant, but curiosity and a flicker of hope persuaded her to attend. Standing before her mirror, Ellie adjusted a simple yet elegant pale blue dress, a birthday gift from her mother the previous year. She tied her hair into a low bun, put on her glasses, and smiled at her reflection. Nearly 2 months had passed since Nate left, since she'd received the anonymous investment and the note reading, "Keep believing in good things." In her book and coffee shop, the warm shelf was thriving, but there remained an emptiness in her heart she couldn't fill. She missed him, despite her efforts to move on. Tonight she hoped the event would bring something new, a distraction from the unanswered questions lingering in her mind. The gala took place at the town's central hall, an old building adorned with crystal chandeliers and long tables draped in white cloth. Ellie stepped inside, slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. Book lovers, donors, and a few familiar faces from the library. She chose a seat near the back, clutching her canvas bag with a notebook and pen, a habit for jotting down ideas. The stage lights flared to life, and the host, a middle-aged woman with a radiant smile, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing through the microphone, "we're honored to welcome a special speaker tonight. He's not only the founder of this foundation, but a living testament to rising from the shadows. Please welcome Mr. Nathan Cross." Ellie froze, her hand tightening on the edge of her bag. His name, Nathan Cross, rang in her ears like a bell. She looked up, her heart pounding, and there he was. From the wings, a tall, lean man emerged, dressed in a fitted dark gray suit, his brown hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. He smiled, a confident yet warm smile. And when the light caught him, those unmistakable bright eyes, the ones Ellie could never forget, shone clearly. It was Nate. No, Nathan Cross. But no longer ragged, no longer huddled under her porch in the rain. He stood there, strong and poised, a different version of the man she'd known. Ellie's breath caught, her trembling hand setting the bag on the chair. She wanted to stand, to run from the hall, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. He was here, right in front of her, after everything. Nathan stepped to the podium, holding the microphone with the ease of someone accustomed to the spotlight. He scanned the audience, his gaze sweeping over the faces, then pausing on Ellie. In that moment, her heart stopped. He looked at her, unblinking, and she knew he recognized her. But he said nothing, only offering a faint, gentle smile, the same one he'd given her on those rainy days. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nathan began, his deep, warm voice pulling Ellie from her chaotic thoughts. "I stand here today not as a billionaire, not as a tech founder, but as someone who lost everything and found himself again. 6 months ago, I disappeared. Not because I wanted to escape, but because I no longer knew who I was. I had money, power, fame, but when it all crumbled, I realized those things weren't enough to keep me standing." The audience sat in rapt silence. Ellie bowed her head, clutching the hem of her dress, fighting back tears. She knew this story. He'd told her in her small living room, his voice bitter, his eyes red. "I lived as a drifter," Nathan continued, his tone soft yet compelling. "No home, no name, nothing. I wanted to see if the world still had room for someone with nothing left to give. And then, on a cold, rainy night, I found a roof. Not a grand house, not a luxurious place, but a small porch where I huddled to escape the storm. The miracle wasn't the porch, though. It was the person who opened the door for me." He paused, his eyes finding Ellie again. She looked up, meeting his gaze, and this time she couldn't hold back the tears. He was talking about her, about that night. "She didn't know who I was," Nathan said, his voice trembling slightly. "She didn't ask where I came from, didn't demand anything from me. She just saw me cold and gave me a blanket, a cup of hot tea, and a place to sleep, near the door, with the condition I'd leave by morning." He chuckled softly, and the audience laughed with him, but Ellie sat there, tears streaming down her face. I left as she asked, but I couldn't forget. She didn't just give me shelter, she gave me something I'd lost long ago. Faith. The hall erupted in applause, but Ellie heard nothing beyond his voice. He went on, recounting his journey after leaving her, how he'd faced his past, reclaimed his company, and founded this charity. But for Ellie, it all circled back to one thing. He was speaking of her, of their time together, of how she'd changed him without realizing it. Life isn't about what we have, Nathan concluded, his gaze still locked on Ellie. It's about the people who make us want to be better. I'm back today not just to build libraries, but to thank someone, the one who opened her door to me, no questions asked, just a simple trust. And I hope she's still here, still believing in good things as she taught me to. The applause thundered, but Ellie barely registered it. She stood, legs shaky, and stepped out from her row. She didn't know what she intended, to run to him or flee from the overwhelming emotions surging within her. But before she could decide, Nathan stepped off the stage, weaving quickly through the crowd and stopped in front of her. Ellie, he said, his voice soft as a breeze. He stood there closer than ever, no longer scruffy or clad in rags, but still her Nate. The man she'd given tea, been angry at, missed. You really came. Ellie looked at him, tears falling, but she managed to smile. You? A special speaker? I thought you were gone for good. Her voice wavered, laced with teasing to mask the lump in her throat. Nathan laughed, a bright, open laugh she'd never seen when he was just Nate. I was gone, but I couldn't stay away forever. Not after you reminded me I could still be myself. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers briefly before pausing, as if afraid she'd pull away. Ellie, I'm sorry for hiding from you, for leaving, but I never forgot you. Ellie shook her head, wiping her tears. I was mad at you, Nate, or Nathan. I don't even know what to call you anymore. But I missed you so much. When you sent that money, I didn't want it. I just wanted you to come back, not for the cash, but because I wanted you here. Nathan gazed at her, his eyes alight, no longer with pain, but with a spark of hope. I didn't dare come back. I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me. But when I pulled myself out of the ashes, I knew I had to do something for you. Not as repayment, but so you could keep chasing your dream. The warm shelf. I've seen it. It's more beautiful than I imagined. Ellie laughed through her tears. You know about it? I put the counter by the window, like you said, and I still brew chamomile tea every day, waiting for some drifter to stop by. He laughed again, freer than she'd ever seen him. I'm not a drifter anymore, Ellie, but if you'll let me, I'd still love a cup of tea. She nodded, her hand gently taking his. Only if you promise not to disappear again. I promise, Nathan said, his voice firm. I found myself again, thanks to you, and I'm not going anywhere. Part 7. A cup of tea and an invitation. The book gala ended with resounding applause, but for Ellie Bennett, the world seemed to shrink to just her and Nathan Cross, or Nate, as she still called him in her heart. The hall gradually emptied, guests departing with smiles and chatter about Nathan's inspiring speech. Ellie stood quietly in a corner, clutching her canvas bag, her eyes fixed on him. He was shaking hands with the last few stragglers, his confident yet warm smile lighting up his face, the dark gray suit accentuating the tall, lean frame she'd once known in tattered clothes. When the crowd finally dispersed, Nathan turned, his gaze searching the dimly lit space. Then he saw her. He approached, not rushing, but with purpose, as if afraid she'd vanish if he hesitated. Ellie, he said, his deep, warm voice cutting through the stillness. You stayed. Ellie smiled, though her heart raced so fast she worried he'd hear it. I didn't know where else to go, she replied, her tone teasing. You just told my story to 100 people. I had to stick around to see what you'd do next. Nathan laughed, a free, easy sound she'd rarely heard from him before. I wasn't planning anything. I just wanted to see you. After everything. He paused, his eyes softening as they met hers. Would you walk with me for a bit? It's nice out there. Ellie hesitated, then nodded. Sure, but don't expect me to brew tea on the street. She winked and Nathan chuckled, leading her out of the hall. The May night wrapped the small town in a gentle embrace. A light breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the roadside. Ellie and Nathan walked side by side on the cobblestone street, the golden streetlights casting their shadows, stretching long, then shrinking with each step. For the first few minutes, neither spoke, only the soft clack of Ellie's shoes and the steady rhythm of Nathan's steps filling the air. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was warm, as if they'd grown used to being together without words. Finally, Nathan broke the quiet. You know, Ellie, he began, his voice soft as the breeze, I still remember that rainy night, the first night I met you. He stopped walking, turning to face her, his bright eyes gleaming under the lamplight. I was cold, wet, and had nothing but a porch to shelter under. I thought I'd sit there all night, like so many others. But then you showed up. Ellie lowered her head, fiddling with the edge of her bag to hide the smile tugging at her lips. I just thought you looked pathetic, she teased. Who leaves someone out in the rain like that? Nathan chuckled, but his gaze grew serious. No, it wasn't just that. You didn't need to know who I was, didn't ask where I came from, didn't want anything. You just saw I was cold and gave me a blanket, tea, and a place to sleep. I'd never been trusted like that, Ellie. No conditions, no calculations. Even when I was Nathan Cross, with money and fame, people always wanted something from me, but not you. Ellie looked up, meeting his eyes. His words touched a deep part of her, the place where she'd felt anger, hurt, but now only warmth remained. I didn't know you were a billionaire, she said softly. To me, you were just Nate, a weird guy under my porch. I didn't think much of it. I just didn't want you to be cold. And that's why I couldn't forget you, Nathan replied, stepping closer. You showed me kindness still exists, even when I'd stopped believing in it. You made me want to come back, not as Nathan Cross of CrossTech, but as someone better, worthy of your trust. Ellie smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes, though she held them back. You scared me, Nate, disappearing, then coming back, investing in my shop without a word. I thought I'd never see you again. I'm sorry, he said, his voice earnest. I didn't dare face you after what happened. But when I reclaimed my company, when I started rebuilding my life, I knew I had to do something for you. Not to repay you, but to help you keep chasing your dream, the way you helped me find mine. Ellie shook her head, laughing softly. You didn't need to do that. I just wanted you to come back and tell me the truth. But thank you. The warm shelf is everything I ever dreamed of. Nathan looked at her, his eyes lighting up with an idea. He took a deep breath as if gathering courage, then said, Ellie, I have an invitation. Not for tea, not for a walk, but something bigger. She raised an eyebrow, curious. An invitation? What, you want me to fix your bookshelves? He laughed heartily, then grew serious. I want to invite you to be a co-founder of a project I'm starting, a network of community libraries where people can come, read, learn, and feel at home. I'm calling it the Living Room Project because of you, because of that little living room where you let me sleep that first night. I'll fund it, but I need someone like you, someone who understands books, kindness, and how to make things warm. Ellie stood speechless, hardly believing her ears. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped, staring at him with wide eyes. You're serious? Me? A co-founder? I'm just a library clerk, Nate. I don't know anything about big stuff like this. That's not true, Nathan interrupted, his voice firm. You know more than you think. You turned the warm shelf into something special, not just with books, but with your heart. I don't need a business expert, Ellie. I need you. The person who taught me a cup of tea can change a life. Ellie lowered her head, fidgeting with her dress to hide the growing smile. She thought of her dream, of bookshelves, tea, and now a chance bigger than she'd ever imagined. Then she looked up, winking at him. All right, but I have a condition. Nathan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? As long as there are bookshelves, warm tea, and someone who occasionally makes a mess, she said, her tone playful, but her eyes bright. I don't want to work with a Nathan Cross who's too serious. I like Nate, the drifter who spilled coffee in my kitchen. Better. Nathan burst into laughter, a clear sound echoing down the quiet street. I promise to make just enough mess to keep you from getting bored, but I'll try not to spill the tea. That's harder to brew. Ellie laughed too, feeling lighter than she had in months. She stepped forward, gently taking his hand, and he didn't pull away. Deal then. The living room project. Sounds good, but you'll have to teach me how to handle all this big stuff. I'll teach you, Nathan said, squeezing her hand lightly, and you teach me how to keep things simple. Like that rainy night. They resumed their walk, unhurried, with little need for more words. That night, when Ellie returned home, she brewed a cup of chamomile tea and set it on the table beside the note. Keep believing in good things. N. She smiled, knowing that from now on, she wouldn't just believe in good things, she'd build them with Nate. 1 year later, the small town glowed in the early summer sun, wildflowers blooming along the road to the warm shelf. But today the book and coffee shop was closed, not for rest, but for something far more special. The wedding of Ellie Bennett and Nathan Cross. Beneath the sprawling oak tree behind the shop, a simple yet warm ceremony unfolded. Ellie wore a plain white dress, her light brown hair loose and adorned with tiny daisies. Nathan stood beside her, in a light gray suit far simpler than the one he'd worn at the gala, but his eyes still shone, gazing at her as if she were his entire world. The guest list was small: Mrs. Margaret, Mr. Grayson, a few library friends and warm shelf regulars, but the air brimmed with laughter and joy. On the reception table, amid trays of pastries and fresh flowers, sat a large pot of chamomile tea next to the small wooden sign Nate had once found, now repainted with the words, Ellie and Nate, from a cup of tea to forever. As the officiant declared them husband and wife, Nathan took Ellie's hand and whispered, Thank you for opening the door that night. Ellie smiled, her eyes sparkling. Thank you for coming back. They kissed under the oak, amid applause and a gentle breeze, sealing a promise to build not just the living room project, but a home filled with love. In the distance, the lights of the warm shelf flickered, a silent witness to a story that began with a rainy night, a cup of tea, and unconditional trust. A year after their reunion, Ellie and Nathan hadn't just found each other, they'd found forever. Thank you for following this heartfelt stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.